Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we are looking at a massive historical event that perfectly mirrors the structure of a classic Greek tragedy. We're talking about a complete dramatic arc, going straight from supreme hubris to utter devastation. We're going to unpack the Peloponnesian War, a devastating 27-year conflict that absolutely and fundamentally rewired the ancient Greek world.
It's just a staggering thought. How does a city like Athens, arguably the most powerful, the wealthiest, and absolutely the most culturally advanced city-state in the entire ancient world, how does it completely destroy itself? The answer actually doesn't just lie in the weapons of their enemies, but in the internal workings of the city itself. So let's trace this tragic descent to see exactly how a society unravels from within.
Section 1. A generation of conflict. Athens versus Sparta.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand this conflict, we have to look at the fundamental geographic and military divide of the era. On one side, you have Athens and the Delian League, this massive, incredibly wealthy sea power that basically controlled the Aegean. On the other side, Sparta and its Peloponnesian allies, an almost invincible land power. After cooperating to fight off the Persians, tensions really started to simmer. The Spartans were terrified of the growing might of the Athenian navy, while the Athenians deeply resented Spartan interference. A clash wasn't just possible, it became inevitable.
The actual spark finally came from a series of proxy disputes, like Athens slapping harsh economic sanctions on Megara. But listen to how the great Athenian leader Pericles framed the situation to his assembly. He said, "If you yield to their demands, they will immediately confront you with some larger demand. It would be no better than slavery." You see what he's doing there? Pericles equated any compromise with absolute submission. And this right here sets the stage for a recurring theme we'll see throughout this explainer: Athenian hubris, and their fateful, incredibly stubborn refusal to negotiate peace. Section 2. Plague, Strategy, and Hubris. The unforeseen disaster.
As hostilities officially broke out in 431 BC, we immediately see a stark contrast in military strategies. The Spartans, they took the traditional route: annual land invasions to ravage the Athenian countryside, hoping to force a classic infantry battle. But Pericles had a radically different kind of math in mind. His strategy was a war of attrition. The plan was to literally bring everyone inside Athens' impregnable long walls, completely abandon the countryside, and use their superior navy to safely import food and launch surprise raids on Spartan territory. On paper, it was brilliant.
But, as we all know, paper plans never quite survive reality, do they? What Pericles totally failed to account for was the consequence of jamming an entire rural population behind city walls without adequate sanitation. In 430 BC, a horrifying epidemic struck this incredibly overcrowded population. The symptoms were gruesome: convulsions, sores, and unquenchable thirst. It caused massive mortality that crippled the exact naval manpower Pericles' strategy relied upon. Worse still, Pericles himself actually died of the disease the very next year. This was a brutal micro-tragedy that severely damaged Athenian morale and stripped them of their most vital leadership. And this brilliantly illustrates a really chilling observation made by the Athenian historian Thucydides. He wrote, "War is a violent teacher. It reduces most people's temperaments to the level of their present circumstances." He noted this while observing the brutal civil wars, like the one in Corcyra, that were erupting alongside the main conflict. The trauma of war and plague wasn't just physical, it was deeply psychological. It was slowly eroding social norms, religious faith, and just basic human decency. Yet somehow, despite the plague, Athens still had moments of brilliant success. In 425 BC, they achieved the unthinkable, capturing 120 elite Spartan hoplites at Pylos. You have to understand, no Spartan had ever surrendered before. Desperate to get their men back, Sparta offered highly favorable peace terms. But here we see Athens' fatal flaw: the gambler's fallacy. Urged on by a violent, hardline politician named Cleon, the assembly completely rejected the peace, convinced they could win even more. They hopelessly overplayed their hand when a massive strategic victory was sitting right there on the table. Section 3. The Sicilian Catastrophe. The Expedition to Syracuse. Let's move along and see how this builds, because a shaky peace, known as the Peace of Nicias, was finally struck in 421 BC, but it eroded incredibly fast. A brash, wealthy young Athenian named Alcibiades essentially broke the peace just to chase personal martial glory. We start to see Athens becoming increasingly ruthless. For instance, in 416 BC, they besieged the tiny, totally neutral island of Melos,
They executed all the men and enslaved the women and children simply because they refused to submit. Finally, in 415 BC, Alcibiades convinced the assembly to launch the largest armada in Greek history to conquer Syracuse, all the way over in Sicily. But in true tragic fashion, the Sicilian expedition was doomed from the start by internal politics. Right before the fleet sailed, unknown Vandals mutilated the Herms, these sacred statues placed all around Athens. Alcibiades was accused of the sacrilege, and instead of facing trial, get this, his reaction was completely startling. He defected to Sparta. This bizarre scandal left the grand Athenian fleet under really indecisive leadership. The result? By 413 BC, the massive Athenian armada was utterly trapped in the harbor at Syracuse and completely crushed. Tens of thousands of men were lost. It was an absolute catastrophe.
Section 4. Collapse and Tyranny. The Fall of Athens.
Taking advice from the traitor Alcibiades, the Spartans changed their tactics. They established a permanent year-round military fort right in Athenian territory at a place called Decelia. Talk about a stranglehold. 20,000 enslaved miners fled to the Spartan camp, which instantly cut off Athens' vital silver revenue. At the exact same time, the Persian Empire entered the fray. They started funding a massive new Spartan naval fleet to strip away Athens' eastern allies and choke off their vital grain shipping lanes coming from the Black Sea.
After several miraculous but very short-lived naval comebacks, the Athenian fleet was finally, definitively destroyed in 405 BC. Blockaded and starving, Athens surrendered in 404 BC. The 27-year war was finally over. And in a really tragic irony, Sparta didn't just burn the city to the ground. Instead, they installed a regime of wealthy Athenian collaborators known as the 30 Tyrants. These oligarchs initiated a brutal 8-month reign of terror, murdering their fellow citizens and stealing property, right up until a resistance movement finally overthrew them and restored democracy. Section 5. Comedy on the home front. Hardships and theater.
So, stepping back from all those macro military maneuvers for a second, how did ordinary people actually cope with the psychological and economic toll of a multi-generational war? The answer lies in the fascinating cultural shifts that took place right in the heart of the city.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that comedy actually served as a major coping outlet. In 411 BC, the playwright Aristophanes produced Lysistrata. In this famous play, the women of Athens, completely exhausted by the war, seize the city's treasury and stage a sex strike to force the men to make peace. It was this desperate, fantastical vision, women utilizing traditional logic and solidarity to save the city when the men's political and military ambitions were quite literally destroying it. It was a stark, biting critique of the assembly's policies, delivered entirely through roaring comedy.
And that comedy, it reflected a really harsh new reality. The shift in daily life was drastic. Pre-war Athens had a booming silver economy with incredibly stable agriculture. But wartime Athens was absolutely flooded with refugees. With so many men killed in battle, previously well-off women were forced out of their homes and into low-paying public labor, like wet nursing or working in vineyards, literally just to survive. The economy collapsed so thoroughly that the once wealthy state had to force its citizens to exchange their silver for emergency bronze coins plated in a thin layer of silver just to pay for the war effort.
Section 6. The Trial of Socrates, a scapegoat in 399 BC.
So the crucial point here is that in this final act of our tragedy, we see a trial that forever changed Western ethics. Even though the restored democracy declared a general amnesty in 403 BC to try and stop the endless cycle of revenge, the trauma of the war left Athens deeply, deeply fractured. They needed a scapegoat. And in 399 BC, they turned on their most famous philosopher, Socrates. Socrates was basically guilty by association. He had been the teacher of the traitor Alcibiades and the brutal tyrant Critias. Now, the prosecutors couldn't legally charge him for those associations because of the amnesty, so they accused him of impiety and corrupting the youth. A jury of 501 traumatized men narrowly voted to convict him.
When they asked him to propose his own penalty, Socrates brashly claimed he actually deserved a reward, which ultimately led the jury to sentence him to death by hemlock. He accepted his fate incredibly calmly, stating, "No evil can befall a good man either in life or in death." He believed completely, unwaveringly, in virtue, his role as the city's intellectual gadfly, and the implicit social contract he had with the laws of Athens, even when they were being used unjustly against him.
Which leaves us with this final provocative question to ponder.
Did Athens kill Socrates? Or was his death really just the final casualty of the Peloponnesian War? It's the ultimate tragedy of a magnificent society that survived the mighty Persian Empire, only to be completely dismantled from within by its own ambition, hubris, and a devastating 27-year conflict. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.